very difficult to have an episode about OCD and bipolar disorder because they're two unique illnesses that present in very unique ways. And I'm not sure what it looks like when they blend together. You may or may not have it. The things that you're describing as OCD may very well just be personality traits or just part of bipolar disorder. So I want to ask you very specifically, is there anything unique about OCD and bipolar disorder put together that our audience needs to know, that our listeners should be aware of or concerned about?
You're listening to Inside Bipolar, a Healthline Media podcast, where we tackle bipolar disorder using real-world examples and the latest research.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Inside Bipolar podcast. My name is Gabe Howard, and I live with bipolar disorder.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Washington, a board-certified psychiatrist.
I want to start out by saying that I love getting the emails that come into show@psychcentral.com. I love the suggestions for the show. I love the topic suggestions. I even love reading through the complaints. You know, people that are like, hey, I think that you can do better. Dr. Nicole, you see them too. What do you think of them?
No, I love them. It actually lets us know that people are listening and that they care enough to send us a message to either give us feedback or to just ask us to talk about something they want to hear.
Yeah, so keep sending them. Again, that email address is show@psychcentral.com. And while we can't answer them all because we get so many, I promise we read them all. And they really, really do inform show topics like today's episode, where we're going to be talking about OCD and bipolar disorder. A little funny story to get us started. I kept saying we need to talk about OCD and bipolar disorder. And our producer said, you don't have to say and bipolar disorder. We know that it's going to be OCD and bipolar disorder. And I was like, no. I want to make sure that Dr. Nicole and I are aligned, that it is OCD with bipolar disorder. And the reason that I bring up this story is because we really should start by just explaining what OCD is and what OCD isn't, because you'd be surprised how often people get that mixed up.
Well, we'll start with what is it? So OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. And as the name says, a person can have obsessions, a person can have compulsions, or a person can have both. So when a person has these obsessions, these are recurrent thoughts that are pretty persistent. These are urges that a person has. These are things that a person just can't stop thinking about. And they're intrusive. They don't want these thoughts. They're thinking about things that are largely distressing. They don't want to be thinking about this all the time, but they can't help themselves.
So, Dr. Nicole, I did a little Googling to figure out how often does OCD co-occur with bipolar disorder. And I did find some talk back in 2014, and I found another study from 1995 that said that it can occur in about 20%. So the first thing I thought is, hey, 20% is at least low. I mean, you know, that means 80% of people with bipolar disorder don't have to worry about this. So I don't know. I was a little reassured there. But I imagine that you probably have a lot more context to add to these studies and that 20% number.
20% feels like a lot to me. I think it's funny how you looked at it and you thought, oh, but 80% of us are good. 80%
I was playing the odds, all right? That's all I had.
I still think 20% is quite a bit. I mean, I think that's a lot of people. And I guess I think of it in terms of that's a lot of people that we could be missing, because I can't say that when I think about my patient population, I can't say that 20% of them I think also have obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's very possible that we're missing these people. It's very possible that we're not asking the right questions and people are just assuming that this is their mania or this is their bipolar disorder. We could be missing people, which is even more reason if after hearing this episode, you think, son of a gun, I think I might have OCD. Probably worth bringing up to your psychiatrist and your therapist, because just maybe some lingering symptoms that you thought were your bipolar disorder could be a whole different disorder.
I do have to agree. I mean, 20% is pretty high. You know, now that you say it that way, I was thinking if I had a 20% chance of winning the lottery, I feel pretty good about my odds, right? If I got a 20% raise, I'd feel pretty good, right? If our audience grew 20%, I would describe that as a lot. But I guess I was focusing on the positive, which is rare for me, that 80% of people with bipolar disorder do not, in fact, have OCD. Because I feel like more than 20% of people are worried about it. So I just feel that a significant number of people who are worried about having bipolar disorder and OCD are probably worried for nothing. That's one of the reasons why I want to talk about what OCD is not and some of the ways that we get confused about OCD. I think that can maybe help us have a better understanding of, when we're worried for nothing, where this all lies. So it's going to be a very meandering conversation, but I
Yes,
hope we
it
cover
will.
a lot of data.
Yes. Yes, it can be very complicated for sure.
One of the things that pop culture always does is shows OCD as just frequent hand washing. That seems
Yes.
to be what most people think of as OCD. The secondary thing that they think of as OCD is being a perfectionist.
Hmm.
Is that a good analogy for OCD, or is this
No,
just
it's a
yeah,
horrible analogy actually
yeah.
for OCD. I mean, yes, there are people whose obsessions take them to being overly concerned with germs. And so then hand washing might be a compulsion that that person does to help with the obsession. Because the other side of that is people may have compulsions that then are in some way meant to calm down the obsessions they have. So, yes, a person could have a germ focused OCD where they are obsessed with germs and illness and sickness, and their compulsion may lead them to hand washing. A person could have an obsession with orderliness, and their compulsion is to make sure that everything is in order. But that isn't the end of the story. It's not the person who just likes their house to be clean. Obsessive compulsive disorder is it's really a tough illness to be stuck with. People sometimes have obsessions that are vastly misaligned with who they are. Imagine a person who loves children having obsessions about children in sexual ways or dangerous ways. That would be very distressing to you if you're somebody who loves kids and you would never hurt a child in your life, but your OCD leads you to thinking about hurting children. That would be very distressing for you to have to deal with. And a lot of times people's obsessions are things that are so distressing to them and cause them a lot of problems way beyond, oh, I need things to be in order.
Dr. Nicole, when it comes to obsessive compulsive disorder, I really do fall back on the people really don't understand it. And again, we always see it of obsessive cleaning or being a perfectionist. But in reality, I know people who, they work with school age kids, and they're obsessed that they're going to hurt them. They're terrified that they're going to be mixed up in some scandal or commit some crime. They're constantly obsessed that they're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, or behave in the wrong way. And just to make sure that we're not sugarcoating this, they could have violent obsessions. They're afraid that they're going to snap and hurt them. They could have sexual assault obsessions. They're afraid that something like that is going to happen. And I want to be very, very clear. I want to make sure that we hit this very, very hard. This is nothing that they would ever act on or ever do.
Right,
And that is why it's very distressing for them, because
right,
these are intrusive thoughts. They're
right,
obsessions that are happening. So, in order
right,
to get rid of that obsession, they develop a compulsion. And that compulsion makes them, okay, well, I want to make sure that I don't hurt the child. So, therefore, I'm not going to bring my car to school because the obsession involves hitting them with my car. Well, this is all fine and well until there's inclement weather, until the bus stops running, or perhaps they're chronically late. So, this isn't even a good coping skill. Talk on that for a minute, because I don't think that the average person who is considering OCD realizes just how deep this runs.
Gabe, and not everyone has compulsion. So we'll say that not everyone does, but sometimes the compulsions to the outside eye don't even appear to be related. So a person may have this obsession about the safety of their children, and they may think, I have to flip this light switch 5 times every time I leave, or my children are going to die on the bus ride home. We know that those things don't connect. What does flipping the light switch 5 times have to do with that? But if a person develops that as their thing, imagine how stressful it is if you can't click it 5 times. Or imagine how stressful it is if you walk out the house and you think, oh my God, did I do 5 or did I do 4? Could I have miscounted? My children are in danger. If you really have those two things linked in your brain, that is going to be very, very distressing to you. If you are someone who has thoughts of sexual acts with women, and you have thoughts of you as a man, you have thoughts of raping women, that's distressing because you're having thoughts and you think, I would never hurt a woman. I would absolutely never do such a thing. I would never even consider that. And then you feel like I can't tell anybody that. I can't share with my partner, my wife. I can't share with my mom. I can't share with the people close to me, hey, I'm having thoughts about raping women. Like that doesn't go over well in conversation socially. So what do I do with that? A lot of people start internalizing that and they start thinking, I'm a bad person. I'm a rapist. Oh my God. No, you're not. You're a person who's having obsessive, intrusive, unwanted thoughts about a very unpleasant thing. Maybe there's some OCD involved there. That's totally different than somebody who's like, yeah, I like the idea of raping women and I am going to act on it and I am excited at the thought of doing. Those are two very, very different things. But to the person with OCD having to live with those thoughts all the time, that's a lot.
Dr. Nicole, obsessive compulsive disorder is very misunderstood in our society. And as longtime listeners of the show know, I think that bipolar disorder is very misunderstood in our society. How do you, as a practitioner, even begin? Somebody shows up and they're like, hello, my name is Bob, and I'm coming to you, Dr. Nicole, and I think that I have bipolar disorder and OCD. Are there any specific questions that you ask for? What's the diagnostic criteria? What should they know coming in for this appointment?
Mm-hmm. They're going to be asked a crap ton of questions. So buckle up and get ready. I am going to go through all of the bipolar disorder questions. We're going to talk about mania, hypomania. We're going to talk about depression. I am then also going to go through, tell me what it is that you feel could be OCD. And I'm just going to listen to them and see, does it feel like this is something that's outside of those mood episodes? Does it feel like something that's more constant and not episodic? Because obsessive compulsive disorder would be more constant than bipolar disorder. I'm going to have to figure those things out. Now, to make things even more complicated in the teasing out, sometimes people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, their obsessions and compulsions can reach a level that is dangerously close to being psychotic, that is dangerously close to being a delusion. When you think about psychosis and the definition of a delusion being a fixed false belief that is not changing even with evidence, that kind of sounds like what we've talked about with obsessive compulsive disorder. I believe that if I don't do this thing this number of times, my children are going to die. I believe that if I don't go to work the exact same way every time, like my building's going to catch fire. Like I believe all these things that can approach delusion. And so then we get into, is this person psychotic? Maybe this is bipolar disorder. So it does take a lot of questioning and it takes a lot of time. This is not a first visit. I'm just going to be able to tease it all out. And when you walk out, I'm going to tell you with 100% certainty, this is what I think you have. The conversation will likely be more along the lines of, okay, well, I definitely think the bipolar disorder is here. Let's keep evaluating the possibility of the OCD.
And to make sure that we're actually looking at the full picture, it's very difficult to ask for help. Who do you talk to about this obsession that you have? It could lead to job loss. It could lead to undue concern. So it's distressing. It is outside of your values and nothing that you want to have, but this is a very, very big problem. So OCD is often looked at as like a quirky perfectionism kind of thing. In fact, the phrase, I have a little OCD, is something that is discussed a lot. But in actuality, if having a little OCD was a good thing, the Dr. Nicoles of the world would be trying to figure out how to give it to people with bipolar disorder. Because after all, then you'd be super organized with a clean house. So I think that pop culture has taken OCD, turned it into quirky, when in actuality, it's very, very debilitating.
I think they've done the same thing with OCD they've done with bipolar disorder. Because even if a person has a hand washing, germ focused OCD, or they have an orderliness, organization focused OCD, it's not just, oh, I like my place to be clean. I can't not have my place clean. I am immensely anxious if one thing is out of place. I can't go to bed at night. I have extreme anxiety if I try not to pick up that one cup that's sitting on the table, to the point that I can't enjoy time with my family because I'm so focused on making sure everything is in order. Like, that's a different thing. Just like with bipolar disorder, people say, man, I would kill to have a little mania. If I could just have a little hypomania, but they just don't understand that it's not just, oh, I have energy and I'm fun and happy. Like, there's much more to it. So it does have some similarities in that sense.
I really like that you turned it back over to bipolar disorder, because that's a great segue. So the first thing that I want people to know who think that they might have OCD is it's possible that you don't have OCD at all. You've sort of bought into the idea that there are OCD tendencies, or your perfectionism, or your things that you enjoy doing, or even things that are frustrating you are part of the OCD spectrum, when in actuality, you're just finicky or even quirky or a perfectionist, or maybe you're just stubborn, or maybe you're set in your ways. And this isn't OCD at all. I talk to a lot of people that feel that they have bipolar disorder and OCD because they're fastidious. And when in actuality, they're just picky. Or they look at symptoms of bipolar disorder and they start to think, oh, these aren't symptoms of bipolar disorder, they're symptoms of OCD. And I say, well, what's an example? And they're like, well, I take 3 showers a day. And I've used that example on purpose, Dr. Nicole, because I thought that I had OCD because I take 3 showers a day. So I want to disclose to the audience that I was concerned about this very early on, because I'm like, why am I taking so many showers? And the reality is it had nothing to do with obsessive compulsive disorder. I just really like to take showers.
Yeah. And part of defining OCD and diagnosing someone is we try to tease through and figure out, like, how distressing is this for you? How problematic is this for you? If all you can say is, well, yeah, I mean, I take 3 showers a day, it hasn't interfered with my ability to function. I'm still working, I'm still meeting obligations, I'm still making it to appointments on time. My showers are reasonable length. It's not like I'm in the shower for an hour each time because I have a routine and a regimen and I have to wash my body a certain way. And if I don't, I have to start over. It's not those kinds of things. The thing about OCD also is we look for these activities to take up at least an hour of your day, like an hour of time, and cause a problem. Doesn't sound like that was the thing for you, but I could see how you would take something like that and say, oh my gosh, I'm OCD about my showers, right? That's what somebody would say. Oh, I'm OCD about it.
Well, when with living with bipolar disorder, you start to pathologize a lot of things, and people, and myself included, but other people around me were like, "Why do you think you shower so much? Nobody else we know showers so much. Let's see, what is different about Gabe that is different about other people?" Well, nobody else showers. Gabe showers. Gabe has bipolar disorder. We don't know anybody else with bipolar disorder. Aha! Bipolar disorder must make Gabe shower. Well, but then you start to do a little research, and nobody says, oh, I live with bipolar disorder and I shower a lot. So then they're like, scratching their head a little bit, and they're like, well, Gabe likes to shower. But you know what does come up? A connection to OCD. So then suddenly, especially if you're in a group of people who are open to mental health diagnoses, open to mental health education, open to a mental health answer to a situation that they consider a problem. Well, suddenly people are thinking, "Oh my God, I might have bipolar disorder and OCD."
Is that something for you, Gabe, that improved as your symptoms improved and you felt more stable? Or is that something that kept going even once you felt more stable?
It is something that I do to this day. I think it's in looking at it, I do think that there is some sort of relationship to bipolar disorder. And the reason that I say that is because when I was really sick, when I was really depressed, I didn't take a lot of showers and I often felt dirty. As somebody who has panic and anxiety, I broke out into sweats and I felt very clammy. And I remember these moments of taking the shower and feeling very clean and refreshed, and those feelings come flooding back. So I think that its causal link to bipolar disorder for today is that it's a coping skill.
Hmm.
And I can see where it's not necessarily a great coping skill, but it doesn't quite reach the levels of maladaptive. right? There's nothing that stops me from waking up in the morning and taking a shower. There's nothing that stops me from taking a shower when I get home from work. And there's nothing that stops me from taking a shower before I get into bed. All of these showers are under 10 to 15 minutes. I only wash my hair, about every other day. So I'm not hurting my hair or anything. So in the grand scheme of things, this is something that we've let go. But it's just interesting that if I had no bipolar disorder to speak of, people would just be like, hey, Gabe takes a lot of showers.
Yeah. Gabe likes to be clean.
Yeah, Gabe likes to be clean.
Gabe likes
But
to be
because I
clean.
have bipolar disorder, people are like, oh, well, what's the relationship there? But there probably is one if I am being fair. But I want to be clear. In my case, it is not obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not even related to the OCD spectrum. And it's definitely not a symptom of bipolar disorder. But it probably did build from there. It's probably related somehow.
Agreed. Probably some relation, but it doesn't really matter. It's not pathologic. You're well within what is appropriate to shower 3 times a day. Now, if you said, "Oh, I'm showering so much, my skin is suffering. I'm showering so much, I'm having dry skin and I'm having to go to the doctor and I'm having to use special lotions and creams because my doctor said it's excessive." That's a whole different story, and that leads us to a different place. And we're back discussing obsessive compulsive disorder and bipolar disorder.
If you think that you have OCD because you do something quirky or you do something different or you do something that your friends and family are giving you shit about because they think it's weird, that does not an obsessive compulsive disorder diagnosis make.
Yeah.
Right? It may be related. It may even be something that you want to improve or work on, but it doesn't mean OCD. And I'm surprised at how much of our behavior lands in the OCD basket when you're managing bipolar disorder.
Yeah, I guess another thing to think about is the context of these symptoms. So if you had said, "Well, man, when I'm manic, I shower like a mad person," then maybe that's your mania. Maybe that's not OCD. Maybe that's part of the mania. Maybe with mania, and we know there's an increase in activity and there's an increase in specifically goal directed activity, that could look like, "Oh, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessive about this thing. I can't stop thinking about this thing. There's racing thoughts. There's flight of ideas. People are hopping from topic to topic. So who knows what'll come up," right? And that could be misinterpreted. But I would more so want to know, are these things that are happening all the time? Or are these things that are tightly linked to a particular episode? Because maybe it is part of your mania that's giving you this look. Like maybe when you're manic, you want the whole house to be organized and you're obsessive about it and you can't not have something in place and you're up all night organizing and cleaning because you want it to be so organized and so clean. But if when you're in a normal mood state or depressed, that goes away, then it's very doubtful that that's OCD related. That's likely more so related to your mania.
So, and very specifically, just to use this as a real example, I can see how when somebody is manic and has a lot of energy and they like a clean house, as many people do, they might start quote unquote obsessively cleaning. Now, remember, just because you have that energy and you are manic and you live with bipolar disorder and you're obsessively cleaning, still doesn't mean that you have obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right.
It means that you have mania and everything that comes with mania. And I think that's a really, really important distinction. I think it's important to bring this up because so many people are over pathologizing their behavior. They want a very specific reason for why they are doing these things. And for whatever reason, Dr. Nicole, the fact that you live with bipolar disorder or you are symptomatic with bipolar disorder isn't cutting it. I want to give some more examples of some behaviors that people with bipolar disorder have, like the showering or the cleaning when manic, that people mistake for OCD symptoms, just to make sure that our listeners can recognize themselves in this if they're doing it. And then I want to move on and give some more examples of what actual OCD looks like and how it relates to bipolar disorder, just to give people an indication of where the show is going. So pull out your medical degree, Dr. Nicole. It's going to come in handy here in a moment.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So some examples of some things that we can do, again, like my shower example, is I know a lot of people with bipolar disorder report that they are very obsessed with their medication, right? They make sure that it's in the pill minder. They have alarms set on their phone. They are really, really, really serious about taking it. And they're concerned that it rises to a level of OCD. That is certainly possible, but I got to tell you, chances are you just remember what it was like before you were medicated. You're
Mm-hmm.
fearful of symptoms coming back. This is much more likely a low level trauma response,
Mm-hmm.
being so concerned with it that may ease with time. You may not grip the bat so tightly in a few months or even a few years. So again, not necessarily OCD. There's certainly nothing wrong with being a perfectionist. My grandfather, who I've talked about on this show numerous times, was an engineer. If things were off by a fraction of a centimeter in his work, it could literally lead to industrial accidents. So he was really, really, really focused on being picky. And while that was great when he was doing engineering projects, I must admit it was a bit much sometimes being his grandson. And I'm just like, Grandpa, the picture is not crooked. And he's like, it's off a hair. That's not crooked to the rest of us. But to him, it was. Again, my grandfather did not have OCD tendencies. He did not have OCD adjacent. He was just picky. However, let's make sure that we're using the same examples to let people know when it is a concern. So, with the examples that I just gave, Dr. Nicole, when would you, as a practitioner, be concerned that, it is in fact bipolar disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder?
Gabe, if that behavior happened all the time, not just in a particular episode, I would at least perk my ears up to listen a little bit more. If the person gave me examples such as, I have gone back home after I've left the house for work to check my pill reminder to see if I had really taken my meds. And I've done that multiple times before, or I can't leave the house unless I check to see if I've taken my meds X number of times, or until I feel comfortable saying, yes, I did it. If I have to snap pictures with my cell phone to prove to myself that I did, those are things that might lead me to start thinking, well, maybe, what's going on. As for the engineer example, I do have a lot of people who in their professional lives, that level of precision is necessary, and it is tough when they move it over to their personal lives. I have also seen people who actually do have obsessive compulsive disorder, and somehow they have found themselves in career fields that kind of support them keeping those behaviors up. So a person could have OCD and organization and exactness be something that they're obsessed with. And then they decide, I'm going to go into this field where that's okay. That feels comfortable to me, because they can feel very uncomfortable in other areas of life and other professions where there's a lot of abstractness and things aren't as concrete. So it can go both ways, but it all comes down to the questioning. It also is not uncommon for a person who has OCD to have their obsessions shift over time. So for a year, they may be obsessed with this one thing. It could then shift to something else. So it may not even stay the same thing over time. So I would also want to know, like, have there been other things before that you've been this focused on, and now it's the pill reminder thing? So it could be that it has just shifted, that energy has shifted to this particular topic. So those are some of the things I would be looking for.
I mean, it definitely sounds like no matter what, if you're concerned with it, you should bring it up to your Dr. Nicole. You should
Yes.
just keep an open mind that you may or may not have it. It might be
Yes.
related to your personality. It may be related to your bipolar disorder, and it may be OCD. I think that sometimes we get very focused, obsessed, if you will, on the idea that it's definitely OCD. And then when
Yeah.
people challenge that, we're not giving good answers, we're not giving good feedback, and we become very defensive. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Well, Gabe, I do think that sometimes people who have bipolar disorder would love to have it not be bipolar disorder, be the thing. People are always framing everything that you do in the context of, oh, that's your bipolar disorder. Oh, your bipolar's acting up. Oh, whatever they want to say about it. I think some people just get sick of saying like, oh yeah, I have bipolar disorder. That's why I do this or why I do that. I think it's almost comforting for some people to be able to say, but I have OCD too. Like I have another disorder going on. I have something else that's going on. And I think sometimes people hold on to the hope of like, could this please not this time be bipolar related? Like, can I get something else? I'm sick of drawing the bipolar straw. I'm over it. And so I do think sometimes people would like that. Also, because bipolar disorder is it's such a diverse disorder. Yes, the criteria is what it is, but within that, people's symptoms are so different. No two people's bipolar disorder are the same. And so it's easy to hear people say, well, I didn't have that with my bipolar disorder. That must be something else. It may just be that for you, this is your thing. And that's okay too. So talking about it with your Dr. Nicole makes all the sense in the world.
Is there any specific phase of bipolar disorder that OCD rears its ugly head more often than others? I mean, should people living with bipolar disorder and OCD be more worried when they're manic, more worried when they have depression, more worried during a stable mood episode, or is it just sort of all encompassing?
It is all encompassing, Gabe. A person might expect to have their OCD symptoms be present really anytime, whether they're in a mood episode or not. But it would not be uncommon for them to see worsening control of their OCD symptoms during an episode. There's a lot of energy that goes into managing your OCD symptoms. When you are depressed, when you are manic, you're very likely not to be able to utilize those same coping strategies that you normally use. And so you can see those things kind of go off the rails a little bit.
I can certainly understand how it might be more difficult to manage OCD when you're symptomatic, but that doesn't mean that OCD is worse than. It just means that unfortunately you're not playing as good a defense.
It could also be that your symptoms are worse. I mean, there are people you think who don't have bipolar disorder who live with just a primary depression disorder and they have anxiety, and they may say to me, like, my anxiety is pretty non-existent for the most part these days, but man, when I'm depressed, there it goes again. So it is very possible that a person could tell me, my OCD was pretty stable. I wasn't having a lot of that at all, and then I got depressed and everything fell apart, or I was manic and then everything kind of popped back up. It could happen.
But just to be clear, it's going to be very individualized.
Very, very individual.
There's no, oh no, OCD and depression are the worst combination. It's individualized.
Very, very individual.
When it comes to information about OCD that's out there, one of the stereotypical things that I heard is if you have to do it, even if it puts your life in danger, it's more likely to be OCD. And the very specific example is, when people walk by and they have to touch every single doorknob on their way out of the house. The question becomes okay, if the house was on fire, would you still have to touch every single doorknob on the way out of the house? And if the answer is no, you recognize the danger and you would leave, it is less likely to be OCD. But if no, of course you would have to touch every single doorknob on the way out of the house. It's compulsory and it's unacceptable not to. You cannot fathom not doing it, even if it puts your life in danger. Is that a fair analogy? Is that true?
I mean, it would definitely make the odds of it being OCD a lot more likely in my mind. But that probably isn't a question I would ask, because I think there are a lot of people who would say, well, no, if my house was on fire, I'd be more focused on other things. But it also goes back to that. How much time is it taking you? Are you having to leave the house so much earlier because you have to do this? Have you had to return home to make sure you do it again because you're not sure you did it right? Has it caused you to be late? I'm looking for more disruption because I would not want somebody to feel like, well, I mean, my symptoms aren't that severe. I wouldn't do it if the house was on fire. Maybe my OCD isn't that bad. I think it can be very disruptive, and any activity that is interfering with your ability to perform in other areas is a problem.
It's very difficult to have an episode about OCD and bipolar disorder because they're two unique illnesses that present in very unique ways. And I'm not sure what it looks like when they blend together. So a lot of our conversations have focused around what is OCD? How is it diagnosed? How does it impact your life? And you may or may not have it. The things that you're describing as OCD may very well just be personality traits or just part of bipolar disorder. So I want to ask you very specifically, is there anything unique about OCD and bipolar disorder put together that our audience needs to know, that our listeners should be aware of or concerned about?
I think from a concern standpoint, people just want to know. People want to know, do I have bipolar disorder? Do I have OCD? Point blank, period. Do I have both? And what can we do to fix it? That's all people really care about. The concern for a lot of people probably lies in the fact that a lot of the treatments for OCD, medication treatments, are often not treatments for bipolar disorder. And so we get into a bit of a pickle because we largely use antidepressants, and we typically try to avoid pure antidepressants in people who have bipolar illness. And so that can make things a little complicated. The good news is there are therapies that are amazing for obsessive compulsive disorder, specific therapies, very specific therapies pointed towards this disorder that can be very, very helpful and give people relief if they suffer from both. Sometimes when people's obsessive compulsive disorder is approaching that level of being near psychosis, sometimes they do get an antipsychotic as part of their treatment. Sometimes people with bipolar disorder get an antipsychotic as part of their treatment. So that may be some consideration for your doctor as they start teasing it out. But really, the hardest part, I think, is people just want to know. And sometimes it's very difficult for us to give you the answer you're looking for. So we do. We look at those things. I want to know what you're like when you're stable with your bipolar disorder. And if you tell me, well, I don't know, I haven't been stable, then we need to get you there. Like that's the first step, is to get you there. And I also want to know, when did it start? Like, if you've had obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms, which often start in childhood, since you were in elementary school, but you didn't have any mood episodes until you were 20, that also changes things. So there's lots of things that we need to know, thus all the millions of questions when you go in for that evaluation.
Somebody living with bipolar disorder who's diagnosed with OCD, you talked about behavioral interventions to treat OCD. Is it harder for people with bipolar disorder to manage their OCD because of the bipolar disorder? Does the treatment change at all? Is exposure and response therapy still something that people with bipolar disorder can safely do and not trigger bipolar symptoms? And I probably maybe buried the lead there. What is exposure and response therapy?
Yeah, you did. You stole my thunder. So exposure response therapy, or ERP, as it is called, because saying all three words all the time can be a mouthful. It is exactly that. It is exposure therapy. So that involves exposing the person to the things that they're concerned about, their fears, in a safe space, all the while teaching them, one, not to engage in the compulsions, because that's hard. So getting them to the point that they are not engaging in those things that they feel like they have to, those things that are taking up so much of their day. It's supposed to give them their life back, because people are held hostage by their OCD symptoms. So the whole point of ERP is to gradually give them exposure and to have a different response other than the compulsions. I don't think there's anything wrong with a person who has bipolar disorder engaging in ERP. But if you're not stable in your bipolar disorder and you're having mania, hypomania, it may interfere with your ability to do it effectively. So we would want you to be as stable as possible in your bipolar disorder so that we can hit the obsessive compulsive disorder head on.
So it sounds like if you have OCD, the treatment becomes exactly the same. And while bipolar disorder may factor in, it doesn't change your odds of getting better. It doesn't make it worse. It doesn't mix poorly, maybe is what I'm trying to say. I'm using very, very, very bad words.
I do think that if your bipolar disorder is not stable, no surprise there, what else is going to be stable? So whether you have PTSD with bipolar disorder, or you have ADHD with bipolar disorder, whatever your comorbid illness is, bipolar disorder is so disruptive. Its stability is paramount to you being able to control just about any other mental health disorder that you have. So we want to get that under control, because it's very likely your OCD symptoms could be worse during one of the episodes, depending on what your symptoms are. It all goes back to, if your bipolar disorder is not under good control, nothing else is going to be under good control.
I imagine that as a doctor, treating them both does make your life more difficult, but it sounds like that you're up to the task, and that it's certainly possible to have both OCD and bipolar disorder and live a relatively quiet, normal, stereotypical, average, boring life.
Boring. Yes. Excitement's overrated. We're all here for getting your symptoms under control. We can do both. If you have both disorders, medication, therapy is very effective for both. If you're ready to jump in and you're ready to really tackle both and do what needs to be done, I think a person who has both OCD and bipolar disorder can see a lot of success.
Dr. Nicole, we've obviously covered a lot of ground. Are there any final thoughts or any last bits of information that you think that our listeners needs to know when it comes to OCD and bipolar disorder?
Yeah, I would say if you are someone who has bipolar disorder and you suspect that you have OCD, just bring it up at your next medication appointment. Just ask, like, hey, I do this thing. I was questioning. I wonder, do you think this could be OCD? The worst thing that person, well, I don't even know if it's the worst thing. Your psychiatrist may likely tell you either yes or no, and they're going to ask you questions and try to figure out what it is and what's what. But there's no harm in you asking the question.
I think it's a powerful question to ask, and I hope that people feel empowered to get the answers that they need so that they can live the best life that they can.
Yeah.
Obviously, managing bipolar disorder is difficult. Managing OCD is difficult. Managing OCD and bipolar disorder is difficult. I think our audience is on board for difficult, but difficult does not mean unmanageable.
And don't be afraid for the difficult. I do believe when you have a disorder like bipolar disorder, you're like, I can't handle another thing. I cannot handle you adding something else to my list of things that I have to deal with. It's okay.
I really want to make sure that our listeners hear that it's not that when you get the diagnosis, you start managing bipolar disorder and OCD. You've been managing bipolar disorder and OCD up until now, just without help, without a proper diagnosis, without proper intervention, and likely without certain tools. So you're already managing bipolar disorder and OCD once you get that diagnosis. So I understand this idea of, oh my God, I can't handle one more thing. But actually, once you get the diagnosis, that doesn't mean that you start handling it then. It means that you start handling it with help. You've got a Dr. Nicole on your side.
Yes. No, that is 100% accurate because handling it alone versus handling it appropriately and with support are two totally different things.
I could not agree with that more. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We need a whole bunch of favors from you. First, wherever you downloaded this episode, please follow or subscribe to the podcast because you don't want to miss a thing. And next, tell people about the Inside Bipolar podcast. We can't keep winning all these awards and meeting all of these great people if you aren't spreading the word. So share your favorite episodes on social media. Send somebody a text message. Bring it up in a support group. Shoot your best friend an email and say, hey, you should listen to this, because sharing the show with the people you know is how we're going to grow. My name is Gabe Howard, and I am the author of the book, Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. You can get it on Amazon if you want, but you don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to head over to gabehoward.com, where you can get some free swag and a signed copy for pretty much the same money. Wouldn't that be cooler? You can also follow me on social media at Ask a Bipolar.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Washington. You can find me on all social media platforms at Dr. Nicole Psych or on my website, drnicolepsych.com.
And we will see everybody next time on the Inside Bipolar podcast.
You've been listening to Inside Bipolar from Healthline Media and PsychCentral.com. Have feedback for the show? Email us at show@psychcentral.com. Previous episodes can be found at psychcentral.com/IBP or on your favorite podcast player. Thank you for listening.